Hi folks, my name is Richard Burrows and I was adjudicating your videos. I first wanted to say thank you for such an incredible performance. I was very delighted to see your overall ability. It's actually quite rare to see this level of achievement in a high school level of play. And so bravo to both you and to your instructors for presenting such a mature work. I mean, this rhyme or reason piece is not an easy work, and I really did think that you did a fantastic job at providing groove and really listening to each other. You really projected a clear sense of ensemble awareness. You had really great technique all the way through, including use of wrist and proper fulcrum. Very, 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 very well done. There, of course, were a few things that we can kind of pick at, and I feel like you're at this level with your obviously with your great instruction that we can get a little bit more into the nitty gritty of this work. I hadn't personally have not played this piece, but I definitely I could see what Nathan was trying to pull off from the sort of the contrast of rhythms and the shifting of patterns. And so one thing that I'd like to talk about from the very beginning here to see if we can kind of isolate this a bit and maybe tighten this up is just this concept of accent and tap from the very beginning, where we have this marimba and multi-percussion setting up our groove. I found that once you guys got a little bit into this, like, further down around a measure 9 or a rehearsal 9, that's when things really started to lock in. But right off the very beginning, we really want to lock into this rhythmic unison, this uniformity of technique. And I think a little bit of this had to do with the sort of hesitancy in the accent, and maybe just this, could have been a bit of nerves, but there's this sort of, we were a bit disjunct and a bit unstuck, as we say, where we were not quite together in terms of our 16th note articulation, and in addition to that, our accent articulation. So I just wanted to play a little bit about play this rhythm to kind of give you a sense of how I wanted to hear this accent really work, and this will help kind of phrase the overall 4-measure intro to really lock it in to a groove. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'll notice that I have a bit more accent than perhaps you would see at a mezzo piano, but I really do think that this is going to elevate the sense of phrase that's coming across. Now, hopefully this comes across in the sort of video footage itself, but again, when we're playing this on a marimba to the bass drum, I think it is, or maybe it's a tom-tom, so this multi-bass idea, we really want to make sure that we emphasize these accents so that the marimba and bass drum don't blend out, don't make the accent kind of disappear between the timbres of the two instruments. So really trying to pull this out. Right, and so getting that that sort of emphasis, the ability to sort of speak that rhythm, I think will really draw out the groove from the very beginning and set that piece right up for success right from the beginning to lock everybody in. Once the other percussionists came in, I actually thought it was pretty strong. So it could just have been one of those, like, nervousness off the very beginning. Sometimes there's also the spread of you across the stage. It did seem like there was a wide breadth from player, I believe 1 would be on, visually I saw it on my left, but it was stage right, and player 5. When you're that far spread across, sometimes we do have some listening issues where we're not able to kind of lock in with those ensembles. So in my ensemble torque, we generally play in a tight U or into a diamond. So we kind of, if we're thinking about the audience this way, we are always kind of thinking about having our bodies close enough to each and our setups close enough that we're able to really lock into each other in a chamber setting. You know, bravo for being able to play this without a conductor. It definitely elevated my respect for your teacher and your ability to be able to play together. You are doing some incredible things there. But I do think that there's an opportunity here for you to kind of tighten up the ensemble and really lock into some of those beats so that there's never a doubt in your mind where groove is coming from. We do need to be able to have somebody who's on stage left be able to lock into somebody who's on stage right. And so having that sort of tighter ensemble positioning will really, I think, elevate the ensemble level altogether. I mean, you already were doing a really great job. So, you know, it's just these tiny little details I think are going to take that over the edge. Another thing that I wanted to point out here is the groove that sets up at the 7/8. Every time the 7/8 came in, I kind of got the sense that we weren't really ever comfortable with that 2+2+3. And again, this kind of falls back to the thing that I was talking earlier about with the accents, where we have this accent to tap pattern that really sets us up to have a real nice rhythmic phrase. And so when we're thinking about how this 2+2+3 works, I really do think that all of the 5 members of the ensemble have just got to understand that fundamental establishing that 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. The lilt, the feel of that time really needs to be emphasized from that 3. Another way that you can think about this is actually to just think about it as one large 7/4 measure. So instead of thinking about 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, if you think about a larger pulse, 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1. So the idea is that we have accents on the downbeat, the first half, and then they're on the upbeat of the second half. And this way you can kind of think about it into a larger phrase. So we start to think about the 7/8 in a bigger sense of 2. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 and 2 and 1 2 3 1 and 2 and 1 2 3 1. Just another way to kind of think about this phrase in a larger sense so that we can kind of tighten up these rhythms. I really, it got very thick, and it may have to do a little bit with the density of the rhythms that are happening in the drum set. But even still, like the eighth notes that are occurring within players 1, 3, and 4, I do think that at the very least, those have got to get locked in much tighter in order for us to get this effect across of this 7/8 lilt. We really do want to get this sort of lift in time before we lock back into the 4/4. So definitely want to put a little bit more attention into that 7/8 section so that we really understand that underlying eighth note. Think about it into a larger group of 2 measures so that we can kind of get that sense of growth. You know, the other thing that I wanted to make a note of is when we have these dynamics and they're on the page in these sort of subito settings, I really think it's great for you to kind of maximize that contrast, particularly at the 7/8, which I did get the sense that you were a bit nervous coming into this and it wasn't ever quite settled. And even more so to kind of allow for that dynamic shift to kind of help lift this section up. And so when we have this, you know, double forte in the kit, you can rely on that for time. I mean, the kit player is really strong. I was very impressed with them for all of the work of this movement, of this piece. But really being able to have that contrast of piano in the other players so that we have this like emergence of sound coming up above the hi-hat. And then again, the drum set has to come back down at the first time is at measure 35, where we have the subito and we build. So when we have these pianos, we've got to take the opportunity here to get that contrast out, to make sure that we're able to see through the phrase all the way to the end to kind of, and then we arrive back up at that theme, right? So whatever the rhythm is. So the idea here is that we have to arrive at that sort of moment. But in the video, I didn't get that sense of arrival. It kind of, the 7/8s were kind of cluttered from a rhythmic standpoint, and there wasn't this sense of contrast happening from a dynamic. And then all of a sudden we're like back to the 4/4, and we're like, yeah, we know where we're going with this. So You know, those kind of details I think are really important to sort of take you to the next level. I really, again, to reiterate, I think you guys are super strong, and so these kind of small little nitty-gritty things that I'm just discussing, I think is just to kind of take you to the next level of understanding of this piece. You know, anytime we have a groove-based work like this, we really do want to take an opportunity to highlight the dynamic contrasts throughout. Especially trying to find points where we want to sort of have a peak of the piece. So if we want to think about this as like a big overall arc, where we're trying to find a moment where we are going to be our most present, our most strong, where that double forte means the most, and try and see if we can set those dynamic qualities all the way throughout this. Dynamics are really just this big spectrum, right? Fortes are not always the same. There can be different fortes within phrases. There can be different double fortes, but we do want to have, if you see forte to double forte, there does need to be that contrast, you know, and as percussionists, we generally, you know, we like to play loud. So that mezzo forte is always in sort of early ensembles, generally on the louder side of things. And I think we really should take an opportunity when we can play a mezzo forte to really take an opportunity to play it at a lesser sound or lesser volume that we naturally want to try and play. In general, most of my experiences have been that mezzo fortes kind of edge on the side of fortes. But then what that means is that we aren't leaving ourselves room to kind of create that dynamic contrast when the forte arrives, you know, compositionally in the piece. So, you know, we get back to the 7/8 at measure 60. Same thing, we want to double piano crescendo through that measure all the way up to 60. I really think that we you know, to go from double forte to double piano, it's a big contrast there, and we really want to try and accentuate that ability. It's a very mature technique to be able to have that contrast and ability to go from very loud sound to a very soft sound, and to be able to have that control where we're playing. We're having that really soft, delicate, nuanced part of the edge of the drum, and then bring up that triplet into the downbeat. These kind of things are really going to sort of take this piece over the edge. You know, really just present it into perfection. I mean, that's what we're aiming for, this sort of musical achievement. And you know, you are doing lots of really great things here. I just want to make sure that we lock into some of these finer details. So for the end, you know, 99 kind of to the end was really solid. You're locked in. You guys play groove very, very well. That is not a thing that you need to be rehearsing on. A lot of the stuff that is more difficult, maybe like those 7/8 grooves, like the playing softly. You know, I find with all my students, soft playing is the hardest playing, and it's the thing we spend the least amount of time on. So I really want to make sure that we can reiterate and focus on getting those more difficult tasks to become more in the forefront of your rehearsal etiquette, so that we're thinking about practicing softer for longer periods of time, so that we are more comfortable playing at that lower dynamic level. You know, this includes playing all of your normal regular rudimental things that you're, you know, whatever rhythm it is, but, you know, being able to play it at a soft dynamic starts to really push the maturity of your approach to this instrument. As you know, we got through all the way through the groove. I did really think that your grooves were fantastic. The 7/8 were always just a little bit thick, and then we get to this sort of ending where we start to get we have these like handing off of phrases. I absolutely thought this was beautiful, and in fact, I thought this was your most dynamic contrast of all of the piece. So you have the ability to do it. You've proved to me, right, starting at 143, that you were able to actually decrescendo and hand off this dynamic to each other. Really, really professionally done. I really appreciated that. So let's take that ability of playing soft and apply that to all the other areas where there's more groove-based playing, where we really try, you know, we sort of settle in and we play a little bit more loud. The very end, I felt like there was a few moments where it got a bit thick and maybe perhaps started to kind of pull a little bit in the overall ensemble tightness. But you know, you know, you landed this quite well. I did think that there was a bit of interpretation issue of the triplets right before the very end. So at measure 160 was at 3. We have the beep ba 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 da 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 da, right? So that triplet ba 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 ba. Make sure that we have a unified approach across the board. Again, probably bringing the ensemble in a little bit tighter. Maybe we arc it a little bit more. I couldn't really tell based on the video if you were in an arc form or if you were straight across, but you know, ever so slightly arcing yourself in so we can get our eyes and our ears on each other at all times. I think that that would really help kind of solidify some of those moments where we started to have a bit of a thickness in our sound. Okay, let's go on to the other piece here. So this, I actually thought you did a pretty good job. It's a far easier piece than the rhythm piece. Rhyme or Reason, I felt that this Natural World Suite was a little bit easier in the overall sense of rhythms and groove. And so therefore, you know, I really raised my level of like acceptance of like making sure that groove is always there for the whole thing. For me, the opening of this, again, to me needed to be very strong and very together. And I raised my acceptance of what I was expecting from you guys in hopes, you know, just seeing that previous piece and how difficult it was. The thing that kind of threw me off was, I think, in the gesture of how you counted this off. I think there was a bit of people may have been surprised by the gesture, I would say. You know, in Torque, we talk about gesture all the time and really solidifying our ability to kind of stay communicative to each other at all times. So, you know, having a little tempo out there for the audience is fine, and mainly for your players, so that we're setting ourselves up for success from the very beginning. So if we're going to come in with ba 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 da 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 da, so we kind of have this sense of time happening already with the rest of our players. You know, I did see your eyes look over, and you kind of gave to acknowledge that you were there, and just having that da-da-dum, right? Really having a very clear gesture, a big upbeat, da-da-dum, would allow for everybody to land back in on that one. And that, to me, it flammed right from the very beginning. And so therefore, I think something we can work on a little bit is tightening up the sort of uniformity of that gesture, ba-ba-bum, so that there is a sense of rhythm in the motion of your hand. By the time we land at get into 10, we're locked in, and you guys are solid. There's, you know, accents are coming up dynamically. I thought there was a nice contrast. Things are starting to move really nicely, and you know, well done for all the way through this. When we get to measure 42, we start to have a little bit of tearing between the fourth and fifth players in those eighth notes. You know, you've been playing all this sort of rhythmic stuff beforehand perfectly together, and just really locking in on those eighth notes, I think is going to help you help everybody line up the rhythms together. When we get even the slightest sense of like pull from player to player, you know, there's a confidence. It becomes questionable where time is. So having one person be the one that drives this sense of time, which I believe was player 5, seemed to be doing a really good job, making sure that we're locking into them so that when we do those unison quarter notes, you know, there's not a big flammed sound. You know, similar to Rhyme or Reason, when we're bringing this, bringing the ensemble in a little bit tighter, you know, I did think that you guys were positioned pretty well, but perhaps, you know, if we just angle ourselves in such a way that we're able to visually see and aurally with our ears hear that rhythm, so we can kind of feel and internalize that rhythm, it'll help us get through this a lot easier. I thought that your transitions into the into the 12/8 and back into the 4/4 were fantastic. You know, really got a sense of drive through this whole thing. And again, so that's in the third movement. We have this really strong rhythmic intro right off the top. I actually was quite impressed with how locked in you were. So it seemed like you were a little bit more settled. The drum set player in this was really fantastic. Real solid, locked in, really groovy. Again, there was a bass drum solo that happened in here at 90 in the third movement. I made some notes about this. We really got to lock into the bass drum, to the kick drum, so in order for us to make sure that we don't phase in our time. So, you know, even like within beats 3 and 4 of that first part of the solo, I think sometimes when we see the word solo, we get nervous and we kind of shut our ears down and we kind of just blindly look into our drum and sort of just try and play our part. But in fact, we have to do the opposite, is that we need to open our ears up and be locked into somebody who's giving a real sense of time. And in this case, you know, you're getting eighth notes that are coming from all players, but I really do think that the bass drum, the kick drum is giving you such a solid sense of beat that this can be somebody that you can really lock into, where you're hitting 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Perhaps something that you can do is in fact count out loud while you're playing, you know, in rehearsal, and make sure that your counting is happening with that foot, so that we can coordinate that syncopation on the upbeats. Just making sure that we're really locked in, because when you're soloing, and if you just slightly tear ever so slightly in either direction, rushing or dragging, in this case we were dragging, you know, it just becomes, it just really pulls the ear from an audience perspective. So we really want to make sure that we're locking into that good sense of time that the rest of your colleagues behind you were giving you. Okay, and then we got to the ending. Again, really great opportunity here to get quiet, which I thought you did brilliantly. But again, playing soft is so difficult. We really have there's no excuse but to play every single thing together as an ensemble. So we got to watch our hands and use our ears to really lock into that eighth note and the quarter note, so that we are playing exactly together. Even though it's super quiet, you know, you guys are really good at playing together when it's loud or strong. But when we get to those softer passages, that the control of the wrist is really what's going to make or break the ability to play along with other players. And you know, like when I do this in orchestra or within torque, I'm literally just watching the hand of the other player, so that I can land that what we call the ictus, which is the point of, you know, we use that term a lot in conducting. The ictus is where the baton strikes. Okay, we're using that ictus to lock in and land on that note right on the drum. Okay. Folks, I thought you did a really fantastic job. Lots of really fine detailed playing. Again, let's work on tightening the ensemble up a little bit more by using our ears, by using our eyes. We can get a little closer together. Focus on playing that 7/8 groove over and over and over again. Really get that rhythm really comfortable. Thinking about that dynamic contrast. And then as well, also thinking about putting a bit of extra work in that soft piano playing, so that we can just be that much more confident playing quietly. I hope you enjoyed some of my comments, and please reach out to me at any point if you have any further questions. Take care.